Hey everyone, it's Kelly for Soy and Shea and thank you for joining me. In the last video I showed you how I made a Pumice and Salt Foot Scrub, and I'll leave a link up in the corner in case you did miss it. I did mention I was putting together some Christmas gift packs, and the other part of this gift pack will be the foot lotion. So I'm taking you along today to show you how I make my foot lotion. Let's go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is measure out our water phase, and the first thing I'm popping in is some glycerin, which is a humectant, so this will help keep moisture in on the skin when it's in the product. And now I'm going to add in some distilled water. Now whenever I add water into a recipe, for me personally, I have found I need to add in about 10% more than what a recipe calls for. So if it asks for 100 grams of water, I put in 110 grams. And this is because during the heating phase, it will actually evaporate out. Now depending on how you actually choose to heat your water will depend upon how much water you lose out of that heating phase. And if you lose too much water, your cream will end up being really thick. So I like to heat my water phase up in a bain-marie system, and I do have my double boiler pots over here. So it's simply just a saucepan with about 2 or 3 inches of water in the bottom, and I have some silicone mats to keep the bottom of my jug off the actual direct heat source. To avoid as much moisture loss as I possibly can, I'm going to cover this up with some cling wrap. Now when I was in the supermarket the other day, I noticed this cling wrap sitting on the side, and it is a degradable one, and it's also BPA free. So I've decided that we're going to start using that one in the workshop. But there are some things here in the workshop that I can't avoid using plastic, such as some of our packaging, but where possible I do try and reduce our carbon footprint by using the degradable plastics for like cling wrap. We're also getting rid of the plastic spoons. Once they're gone, I'll be using the metal teaspoons. So we do try and reduce our carbon footprint when we are making our products too. So I'm going to go and pop this into my double boiler, and then we'll move on to the oil phase. So our water is now heating up, and I'm waiting for it to come up to a temperature between 70 and 80 degrees. And then once it gets there, I'm going to hold it for about 20 minutes. Now some people say you don't need to do that whole process, but I find that I get far better results if I do hold it for 20 minutes, and there's less chance of my emulsion actually breaking on me. So while I'm waiting for that to come up to that temperature, I'm just going to weigh out some shea butter. I love using shea butter in all of my products because of its moisturizing property and all of the other nutrients that it also has in there. So just got a little bit too much. I need about half of that back in. Okay, and then I'm going to measure out some cocoa butter. Okay, so I'm going to put my cocoa butter in here next, and I'm using it for its emolliency and also because it thickens the lotion up, and I want a really nice thick foot lotion. So I'm just going to take a little bit off that piece of chunk there, and that is perfect. So to help thin out how thick those butters will make the cream, I am adding in some Olive Squalene. It's very easily absorbed by the feet. I do like to have a lotion on the feet that is easily absorbed, so you don't have greasy feet and then slip all over the floor after you put your lotion on. And it also has or it's meant to have antibacterial properties, which I think is great for the feet, and it does also add a barrier to the skin which helps to keep the moisture in, so that stops our feet from drying out. Now I very rarely add stearic acid into any of my lotions because I find stearic acid makes them a little bit too thick and heavy for me, and most of my lotions I like to be nice and light on the skin. But because this is a foot lotion, I want it to be nice and heavy and nice and thick, so we're going to add in the stearic acid just to help get a nice thick lotion. And the key ingredient to helping water and oil mix together into your lotion is an emulsifying wax. Now the emulsifying wax I use is a vegetable emulsifier. The different emulsifiers will have different effects on how thick your lotion will be, so just know how yours behaves, and you can add more or less of an emulsifying wax to get it thinner or thicker. But you do need to make sure that you're adding enough emulsifying wax that your lotion actually stays together and doesn't break. So now I have all of my oil phase in the jug. As soon as my water phase comes up to that 70 to 80 degrees, I'm going to pop this into the other bain-marie bath that I've got, and we're going to hold it for 20 minutes, and in that 20 minutes this will melt down and it will be all ready to combine. Okay, so the water has come up to that temperature of about 70 to 80 degrees. I'm just going to pop my oils into this next saucepan here, and I'm going to set my oven for 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll combine the two. Alright, so the alarm has gone off on the stove top here, so I've just gently picked that one up out of the water. I've just got a towel here that I'm going to wipe the base of my jug here so we don't end up with any water in the product that shouldn't be in here. And then I'm just going to leave that on top of the little silicone mat there, and we'll grab this other jug of oils out. And again, I'm just going to wipe any of that excess water off the jug so that when I tip my oils into that water, I don't end up with any of that boiling water into my actual lotion mix. Right, so now that I have that all nicely dried off, I'm just going to pull this one a bit closer to me. Now I am a bit concerned about this new cling wrap that I found. It doesn't seem to stick to the bowl very well, so I had to put my silicone mat on the top of it just to stop it from pulling off so I didn't lose all that water out of there. I did double check, I've still got the very similar amount of water per my leader line on here, so I think I have only lost that 10% that I usually lose, so we will find out in a bit. Right, so the next step I'm going to do is pour my oils and water together, and this process always fascinated me from the first time I made a moisturizer. The fact that oils and water mix because of that emulsifying wax, and you know that you've remembered to put your emulsifying wax into your mix when your water goes into this milky white colour. If you pour oils into water and it doesn't get that milky look, you've either got not enough emulsifier in there, or you've actually done as I've done in the past and forgotten to put it in altogether. So I'm going to get as much of this oil out of this jug as I possibly can. So now I'm going to use my stick blender just to emulsify that together. So that I don't get a big vortex of hot liquid coming out of my jug, I always pulse my mix there. What I'm going to do is just let this rest for a couple of minutes. I'm going to put the wrap back over the top because while it's still hot it will keep evaporating that water. So I'm just going to put my wrap over the top and I'm just going to pop the silicone mat on the top of it as well just to hold it all in place. I'm going to let it rest for about 5 minutes and then I'm going to come back and pulse it again. Okay, so it's had about 5 minutes of resting. I'm going to come back and give it another pulse. It is really important to emulsify your lotions with a stick blender. It's pretty hard to actually get it to emulsify using a whisk. You would have to be whisking it for a very, very long time to actually get it to emulsify. Whereas using your stick blender, that really quick action of it gets those oils and water blended really well. Right, so that has been mixed up really well, and I'm going to leave it sit here now until it comes down to a temperature of about 30 to 40 degrees. And again, I'm going to make sure that it is nice and covered so it doesn't lose too much of the water while it is cooling down. And once it gets down to the right temperature, we'll come back and we'll add our preservative and fragrance in there as well. Okay, so this has been sitting on the side now for a couple of hours, and I've been coming back every so often, giving it a stir, making sure that the emulsion has stuck. Now, I am going to start by saying I did end up changing my cling wrap on the top of this. I don't think I'm too impressed with that degradable cling wrap. It'll probably end up back inside the house. It really doesn't stick to the jars very well, and I was afraid I was going to lose too much moisture content. So if anyone does have any suggestions on what I can use to cover the top of my pans and jugs when I'm boiling the water, please let me know, because I am always looking for ways that we can be far more environmentally friendly, but I also don't want to compromise any of the products either. So as you can see, this is now thickened up really nice. We should be sitting at about that 40 degrees. Yes, so just giving it a bit of a stir to get that sort of average temperature, and we are sitting at the 39 degrees Celsius, so I know I'm right to go ahead with the next steps. So the next thing I'm going to do is put in my preservative, and as always I'm using Nipperguard SCE. Now to add this particular preservative I do need to kind of be within that range of 30 to 40 degrees, though the manufacturer does say that it can handle slightly higher temperatures as well. So you don't want your temperature to be so hot that it burns off the preservative and renders it useless, but you also need it to be warm enough that it actually activates that preservative once you put it in, and then as it cools down it will preserve the product. The next thing I'm going to pop in here is the essential oils, and my foot range, as I mentioned in the foot scrub, it's one of the few products I will use essential oils in, and we have some peppermint, some rosemary, and I also have some lavender fragrance oil just to tone down that peppermint a little bit there. So I'm going to pop that one in. And then my sort of thing that I like to put into any product that goes on feet or anything that is particularly greasy like body butter, I like to add in just a little bit of tapioca starch. And I find by putting this in, it really stops the butters from being too greasy on the skin. You don't need much when you do add it in, but without it, you really do notice a difference. Next time you're making a cream and you think it may be just a little bit too greasy to the touch, try adding a little bit of tapioca into it, and you will find that it will more than likely make it not so greasy. If that doesn't help, it does mean you've got too many oils within your product. So what I'm going to do is just give this a quick mix up with the stick blender, and then I'm going to leave it to cool right down overnight before I pot it up into its containers. Alright, so like I would if I was making a loaf of soap, I'm going to make sure that all of the sides of my bowl are scraped down, so it makes sure that all of that product is incorporated into the preservative and the fragrance, and we don't end up with any bits of cream that isn't part of that preservative system. And as I said, I'm going to now cover this up, leave it overnight to cool down to a temperature in the low 20s before I pot it up. We're back the next day, and this is now cooled down to the low 20s, and it's ready to start potting up. And I pot them up into these tubes. Now every time I post pictures of my foot cream, hand cream and things like that, I get lots of questions about how on earth I get my lotion into these tubes, so I'm going to show you. What I have here is a plastic container with a Ziploc bag in it, and I pretty much fill these containers up exactly the same way that I do all the pots as well. The trick I have found to doing this though is not to overload the bag with product, otherwise you kind of end up with issues of it going everywhere. So that should be about enough. We'll go about half, so we'll do it in 2 lots. Now what I'm going to do is pick my bag up. I am going to squeeze out all of the excess air that's in this bag. If you don't squeeze the air out, you end up with air pockets in the bag as you're squeezing it into the tube, and then that can lead to problems with getting your bag or your tube nice and filled. So I've squeezed all that out. And now what I'm going to do, because the opening on my tubes are quite small, they're probably just under 1 centimetre, I'm only going to snip off a very small amount on the corner of this. If you do too big a snip off that corner, then you find that the cream just goes all over the place and doesn't go nice and neatly into the hole. And if you get it all over the top of the tube, it makes it really difficult to start filling them up. So I'm just going to pop my tube onto the scale and tear it out to 0, and then I'm going to start filling them up. So it really is just a matter of putting the cut bit over the hole and then squeezing in. Okay, so I'm going to keep filling up the rest of these tubes here, and at Christmas time I also offer these little 50-gram tubes, and this people can have little stocking stuffers, and then that's a really good way of then getting people to come back for bigger products in the new year. So I'm going to get all of these filled up, and then I'm going to come back and label them up. Okay, so what I'm now going to do, because I need to refill the bag, I've got these clips which I got from IKEA for closing bags up. I'm just going to pop that onto the corner. I'll do that one a little bit better than that. And then I'm going to pop it back into my container and fill it up. By putting that clip onto the bottom, I know that as I put more cream in here, it's not all going to run out of the bottom, and it means that I can keep reusing this bag until I'm finished with it. Okay, so whenever you're doing this, it always helps to know how much your little bags weigh. So I know that this bag weighs 8 grams, approximately the same weight as these little tubes. I've only got about 40 grams left in here, and I should have 100 grams in here. So I'm thinking that by using that degradable cling wrap, I actually lost a lot more than that 10% that I usually lose. So I am going to have to seriously rethink that. So because I don't have enough to fill up all the little tubes that I was going to, but I still have a fair bit of lotion left in my little bag, I'm going to make up some of my little sample pots. And these little pots, they're little 10-gram lip balm pots, and when I get orders online, I like to include samples or freebies of products that we sell. So I'm just going to use those little pots to make up some little sample pots to give out with orders. Right, so we've got all of our labels printed up and cut down to size. I do all the designing of my labels in Corel Draw, and then I print them up on my laser printer. I've also just discovered these labels lately. I used to use a clear label to go on here, and I was never truly happy with them, but I've recently discovered these poly labels, and they're like a thin film. It's not a paper, but they seem to wrap around these tubes a lot nicer. You do have to be a little bit more careful so you don't get air bubbles in them, but they do look much better and they stick for longer, and they're also water or weatherproof, so it does mean that for the things like my shower gels and those items that get taken into the bathroom, they won't come off and they still look good after a while. So that's one of the little 50-gram ones, and I pretty much do the same process with the big tubes as well. So I'll just grab one of the bigger ones, and I start from my ingredients end, or what's going to be on the back of the tube. Just get some of that backing off there. And so when I'm looking at the tube, I'm finding the actual back of my tube here. I'm peeling it off, lining it up so it's nice and straight, and then as I push it down, I'm kind of pulling to make sure that that poly material, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I will leave links to it down below, is nice and tight and with as few air bubbles as I can possibly get. So that is what the big one looks like. So I'm going to finish getting all these labels stuck on here, and then we'll add some shrink bands to them. Okay, so that is all the little tubes now labelled up. For these little pots, I do something a little bit different here. So I have, again, my labels which I've printed myself. I have some little round ones here which say what the product is and say that it is with compliments. And I'm just going to pop those onto the top of all of these. And then onto the bottom of each container, I put my little batch date stickers. So these ones are printed up on the Brother QL printer, and they're just the little 12mm round circles. And now that I've got those little batch dates on there, I have these little bags here, and all I'm going to do, first of all, I've got some other stickers here which have got my ingredients, how to use, and just the other information that needs to be a part of all the Bath and Body products. I'm just going to pop one onto the back of each of those, and then I pop my little cream inside, and then I'll seal it with the heat sealer. So that's basically how they get sent out. It may seem a little bit excessive for doing as a sample, but I have had great success ever since I changed over to doing my samples like this. I do have little what they call miler bags to put samples in as well, and generally I'll put things like the body wash and the foaming sugar scrub into those because it's far easier to get them out of those when you're in the shower, whereas with things like your moisturizers, oh, this bag's being difficult, things like your moisturizers are much easier to get out of a little pot. And since I started putting them into the little pots, I have found that people will come back and buy the actual full-size products because these have been presented so well. So the next thing I do to actually finish these off, I have got some shrink bands. I'm going to pop them onto the bottom of each of my tubes just to make sure that the cap is nice and sealed, and this just keeps them all nice and hygienic when I'm at the markets, and also means that when they are in transit, the tops of them won't pop off and then put product all through the delivery, making everything else ruined in the package. Okay, so everything is now all finished and complete, and here is the foot cream, and this will be teamed up with our Pumice and Salt Foot Scrub to make some Christmas gift packs. I hope you have enjoyed watching how I make my foot cream. I have left my recipe for you guys down in the description box down below. If you did enjoy watching how I made my cream, why not leave me a thumbs up and any comments down below. If you do have any questions, I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can, and if you haven't already, why not subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell sign, and it will let you know the next time I bring you a video. So until the next time, have a great week. Bye.